Yan. So, rundown lang yon. Let's start with the factors that affect human behavior. Yan first, heredity. Yan, genes. There would be chromosomes from our parents na may papasa sa offspring, yung X and Y chromosomes. Yan. And of course, yung mga bits ng genes from the DNA. Yan. That is already passed by the sperm cell once it mates with the egg cell ng female. Yan. Heredity. So, it is not just on the physical being, yan, yung physical characteristics, but also mental and yung capability somehow in other researches na naipapasa through heredity. Yan. And for example, kanang mga term nila na murag carbon copy kasi mo ang ginikanan either sa mother or sa father. Yan, passing of traits. Next is environment. It really changes the landscape niyan sa human behavior. Even though you have your genes, yung heredity, even though you have that certain level of learning, na kay advantage or disadvantage in those, pero iba talaga ang epekto ng environment, yung kapaligiran. If your youth was centered on a very aggressive or shall we say kanang happy-go-lucky lang and also very careless environment, it will somehow affect decision making and the evolution of the behavior ng isang individual. Yan. For example, if your environment is exposed to different crimes such as yan, pagnanakaw, pagpatay, and other crimes, the more you see it, the more it becomes a common picture or common na situation na lang sa'yo. And of course, once you gain some friends or socialize with those people committing those, there's a big chance that your environment would fully influence your future behavior. Yeah. Learning, process in which behavior changes as a result of experience or practice. That's why practice does not make it perfect. Practice makes you learn things which previously hindi mo na master or hindi mo na laman. Yan. For example, mga athletes, mga professionals, di ba? All of those industries, all of those sectors of society involves learning. Yan. Pero hindi pwede na puro learning lang. You must also evaluate what you have learned. Ang dami kang ngang natutunan pero hindi mo inisip na kailan mo yan gagamitin. Yan. Next, these are the causes of conflicts in human behavior, the physical, social, and economic conflicts. Physical cause, natural causes yan. Yung mga, shall I say, mga providential causes. Yung causes na beyond the power of man, which of course affects the physical being ng ecosystem or ng tao. Like for example, natural calamities. Next, social conflicts, restrictions or rules inside the house, sa school or sa community. For example, kung ang pamamalakad sa bahay nyo is somehow strict, kana, for example, yung mga babae dyan, na, di pwede maglaag-laag, kana maglatagaw. Stricto ang parents, na murag na ay martial law. Na. So, it might have a double-edged effect. Pwede positive, pwede negative. The same goes sa school. Kung ang school ninyo kana wala kayo pakialam sa creation ng gangs na certain group sa eskwelahan na involved sa violence, then it would affect the learning. It will affect the behavior of a certain child. The same goes sa community, yung sinabi ko kanina. Kung lumaki siya sa komunidad na prone sa mga krimen at malapit sa temptasyon ng krimen, really would affect his behavior and choices in the future. Next, economic conflicts. Yan. This is common especially sa third world countries or even sa mga families na hindi masyado, shall I say, nakakaluwag economically. Yan. Inability to acquire materials can lead into conflicts within the family or even result to commission of crimes. Na, for example, wala man mo yung internet, and siguro na understand man namo na maglisod mo pa-load na mga data cap pod kana limit sa ato ang capability sa communication sa nasod. It is an economic conflict. Gusto niyo makatuon o mga lessons, pero the limit on your cellphones or laptops or the limit economically, financially, yan. Those are the things that restricts the opportunities ninyo. Ayan, poverty is the best and common example. Next, basic types of human behavior. First is inherited or innate behavior. Yan. There are two considerations. First is physical traits and mental traits. Yung sinabi ko galing sa heredity, inherited. Most of those are certain reflexes or yung mga actions na ginagawa ng isang individual na virtually uncontrollable. Yan. They are either desirable or undesirable traits. Intellectual capability, special talents, yan, or undesirable traits such as mental defects. Yan. Pero generally, sa ngayong panahon, there's a good number of offsprings o yung mga kabataan na yung mental defects nila were not really inherited. But basically, were defects during the pregnancy ng mother. Siguro yung mama nila or the mother while being pregnant na sige gyosi or sige tumar og tambal, which is very dangerous sa mental and physical development ng bata. That's why there are certain rare illnesses or conditions ng mga bagong panganak na bata at some point. Next, learned or operant behavior. This is basically done in the environment and done especially at school. Involves cognitive adaptation, the ability to think and react, which enhances the capability of a human being to cope with changes and certain problems. Of course, its main goal is to improve, its main goal is to improve and change the way the human being lives. Okay? So there are considerations for learned behavior. Yan, yung sinabi kanina, environment, yung kultura ng isang environment kung saan nakatira ang isang individual, the training na kinalakihan or nakasanayan ng isang individual. This is very much done not just in the house but also sa future um, sa future ng mga interactions ng isang individual. For example, yung police or any law enforcer, bago na sila isabak sa real McCoy, sa real application, they will have simulations or yung mga almost real world situations done during training in order for them to have the sense of instinct or additional knowledge for them to be ready when a certain event comes into contact with them. Yan, for example, yung mga bata, may iba dyan na 3 or 4 years old, tinuturuan na magsalita ng ibang lengguwahe. Na, di ba, si Scarlett Snowbell, kung inseminated na anak ni Doktora Vicky ug ni Hayden. So ayun, she was trained to different fields even if she was already young or she is young. Samot na kumo, dako na, and then continuous ang training. But there are some na sabihin natin, they want to achieve something, pero basically ang heredity nila didn't really cope up. The environment was also a factor. So, efforts of the will, mindset. Kumbaga tong kay Kobe Bryant, Mamba mentality. Alam niya na he has the talent, he can develop that skill, pero hindi importante yung talent lang. Efforts of the will or willpower ng isang individual. There's a saying na hard work beats talent. That comes with training. Yan. Efforts of the will. It's still related to training yourself or being trained. And of course, the environment you want to be with. Next, personality dimensions that affect human behavior. First, extraversion, the dimension that dictates condition, ability, neuroticism. Yung innate biological predisposition. For short, yan yung mga tao na may complication sa behavior which is acquired through stressful or upsetting or negative events sa kanilang buhay. Na kanang mga tinatawag na neurotic. It's not really a sickness na long term, it can be cured. According to studies, in 6 months, pwede yan mabago talaga. Again, depends on the willpower ng individual. Yan, extraversion, this was already discussed sa inyo sa CRI 211 ninyo sa theories. Being extrovert or very open. Yan. Next is psychotism. This is much severe than neuroticism once it is uncured. Yan. Psychosis, yan, or pagiging antisocial, insensitivity, disregard for danger, or yung mga delusions. Yan, attracting toward the unusual events. Okay, are there any questions? Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Nako, bright ang mga bataan, no? Sige, kung walay pangutana, I'll proceed next to back sa ato ang sim. Na kay nay uban dire siguro nagganahan sa last part sa coverage. Sige, pagbigyan ko kayo niyan. You can also post your questions sa chat. By the way, your exam, gi-hide sa nako na para dili ninyo bahagi sa kapwa ninyo estudyante. So, even though essay na or even though it is MCQ, don't worry, binabantayan ko. Like, for example, yung last time, daming mga format ng essay. Yan. Pati ang number of words, pareho. Wow. Kaya nga essay eh. It is involving your capability to construct a sentence, pati yung mga natutunan nyo yourself. In yourself dapat. So, I would go forward to developmental tasks. Yan. I'm sure you have read your sims. I would not expound more about yung stages of life. Yan. So, developmental task could be any task that emerges or at most at a certain period in life, maybe unsuccessful accomplishments, which leads to failure to perform certain. Yan. So, according sa theory ni Robert Havighurst, when individuals effectively fulfill the developmental tasks at a stage, they feel pride and fulfillment. Yan. That's a mental um, achievement for an individual. They also gain approval from their peers or their community. Yan. So once an individual has received positive feedbacks, yan, naturally it boosts the moral ng isang individual. Yung kumpiyansa sa sarili. And of course, the capabilities would soon emerge, yung additional capabilities. Yan. 'Di ba? Ang sarap pakinggan na nanalo ka or meron kang achievement na na-unlock. Yan. For example, puhon, mapasar mo sa law ni Attorney Thunder, dalugdog man Thunder and Lightning. So na puhon, you have that achievement that you have passed your first test sa law. And puhon, kaloyan ni Kibuloy, na makagraduate mo. That's another achievement on a certain stage in our lives. Yan. Okay, next. Yan. According sa kanyang theory, there are 6 age ranges for an individual in having that mastery sa mga tasks. Yan. For example, from 0 to 5 years old, dyan pinofocus ng mga parents and of course the other contributors yung mga developmental tasks na nakikita ninyo. Okay? Yan. Paglalakad, paggamit ng toilet, pananalita, and of course, socialization. Next, middle childhood. Yan. More advanced skills compared sa early childhood. Yan. Early problem solving, the start of being independent sa actions, and of course, values. Yan. Up to the adolescence. Yan. Establish emotional independence, learn certain skills, achieve gender-based social role, which was starting nung 20th century. Na, kanang pagiging patas, dili siya patriarchal na society or male dominant. Yan. The start of feminism, sexism, yan. And of course, mature relationships na dala na magsugod ng mga gapundo na uyab or other socialization interactions na excuse me. Next, sa early adulthood, yan, from 18 to 35 years old, Diyos ko, choose a life partner goes in the latter stages of this. Yan, so around above 25, 35, that's already the common na situation or panahon na pipili na ng the one. Of course, with choosing a life partner, that's already the start of establishing a family. Yan. Next, of course, when you have a family of your own, you need a house. Yan. Hindi kompleto ang house kung walang mga tao sa loob, which makes it a home. And of course, early stages niyan, the start of finding and achieving and establishing a career. Na, for example, sa inyo ha dire, gusto ninyo mahimong law enforcer someday. Na, ang uban gusto siguro mahimong abogado. Establishing your own career. After that, middle age, yan. You just maintain the career you have, the stature or yung standing sa living, and also other civic actions. Yan. And of course, late maturity, yan na yung start ng senility. Na retirement from work, deteriorating health, yan. Sensibility or yung pagiging sensible, and of course, wisdom that comes with late maturity. So according din sa theory ni Havighurst, there are different biological influences which dictates those developmental tasks and everything in between those. Yan. Next, yan. Of course, just like everything else in this world, there are certain social influences that affect those developmental tasks and may accelerate or stagnate those or mapundo. So, of course, one of those are media. Ang pinaka-common ngayong 21st century. Samot na tong pagsugod sa 2010s. Yan, hangtod karong dekada, social media has been the major influencer of the lives of people today. Technology. Okay? So, next, I will proceed sa concepts and principles of human behavior. Okay? So, according kay Simon Freud, an Austrian neurologist, he thought that the thought of a human being, which is related sa theory din ni Charles Darwin, yan, theory of natural selection, na ang physical state ng individual and the mental state are correlated. And also, diba, sabi ni Charles Darwin, we were supposedly originating from apes. Yan. And also, just like apes, our development goes on after birth. And of course, yung basic structure, basic component of society, which is family, affects it. Yan. So, of course, during copulation or sexual intercourse, there is what we call libido. Yan. There's something na tinatawag na libido. Yan. It's a liquid from our body which, of course, elevates when our sexual urge increases. Yan. So that libido would then be um, distributed to different parts of the body upon the excitement or upon a certain part being excited. Diyan na pumapasok yung mga sexual urges. Yan. And of course, dahil modern ang panahon since the 20th century, according sa libro na, I think it was the Kama Sutra, there are certain parts of the body which would ignite or has most of the libido going to that part in order to attain a high sexual urge o yung feeling ng pagiging yan, nagiging hot. Yan. So libido commonly sa females and some men first centered sa mouth. Yan. First centered sa mouth. That's why let's be professional with this. That's why sa during a sexual encounter, hindi yan dinidiretso, di ba? Sa tawag ana, there's a foreplay. Yan. And the foreplay, most often than not, starts with the use or the target, the mouth. That's why there is torrid kissing. Sabi na, French ba na or wala lang? Japanese ba na type or whatsoever. They use the mouth first. Yan. Yan yung, I think this was a song na foreplay na upat ka tao gadula for play years na. Actually, mao na kung sa this is part of na patulong naman ta sa sexual deviation. This is the start. Yung libido, that liquid inside our body would be distributed to key parts ng body in order for that sexual urge to increase and be sustained. Na ay mga artificial to mga man-made na products which increases that, pero of course it wouldn't ignite if it is not done naturally. Na mo nang start na murag manginit na the sexual urge would start. So also, according kay Freud, yan, oral stage of development. So the oral stage of development, as what I've said earlier, centered sa mouth. Yan, the satisfaction ng bata, 'di ba? Una, when they were babies, they to thumb suck. Ang satisfaction ng bata hindi sa thumb or sa kamay or sa fingers, nasa mouth. 'Di ba? Pagbigyan mo ang bata or infant ng isang bagay, they will try to chew it or ipasok nila sa bunganga nila. Because that is the first or the earliest stages of development ng isang infant, oral na. So the same goes with sexual deviancy. Most, if not all, would start with the urges orally. Yan. So of course, upon the excitement, it would go down to the anal zone na Oedipus ug Electra complex. Anyway, so of course it would start from the oral, the next to the anal zone or kingdom genitalia according to one book. I saw that in an e-book na sinasabi yung kingdom genitalia or the genitals going down to the yung sa anal na yung labasan ng dumi diyan, yung satisfaction andyan. Okay? So of course, the libido would still be distributed to those bodies kasi yun ang mga parts ng body na critical for sexual urges. Yan. Yung level ng estrogen o testosterone would go into a peak once those receptors and those parts, like for example sa mammary glands, sa sexual organs ng mga tao, once those receptors doon would be excited or tumaas yung sexual urge, then the libido and the concentration of blood would stay there. Yan. For example, sa females, yung part sa kanilang basta yung part sa kanilang sexual organ, yung kanang medyo sa tunga, kanang murag, basta gamay ra na, it will start to harden. Na, dili si James Harden ha. The same goes with breasts ng both sexes or both genders. Diba? Once those receptors would be urged or would be satisfied sexually, they would start to harden. Nga naman, ang concentration of blood would go on to those parts. The same goes with those sexual or itong mga sexual reproductive organs. Yan. Yung penis at ang vagina. Okay? So, Freud's theory of personality, it has been a common knowledge na sa inyo. Itong id, ego, and superego. Id is the pleasure principle. Unsa na ego? Superego. Anyone? Superego. Id, ego, superego. Wala jud. Anyone? Pwede ninyo ibutang sa chat. Okay, so sige, dalian ko na lang. Id comprises of two sorts of biological instincts or drives. Pleasure principle, they called it, or si Freud, tinawag yun na eros and thanatos. Eros, or life intuitive, makes a difference the person to outlive. While yung thanatos, or death intuitive, is seen as a set of dangerous strengths which show in all human creatures. Yeah. Please take note of those. Yung major drives ng tao nasa id, pleasure. Mauna. Of course, as what you can see below is Freud's iceberg theory. The conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind. Yan. Next. Yan. Iceberg theory. Also, we have what we call fixation according kay Erikson. Yan. Again, yung sa oral stage of development, nung pagkabata, yan. Di ba ang mga bata ang pinapakain sa kanila soft foods because they don't have developed teeth. To the point, mga parents, there are some of them who would forcefully feed the babies. Some of them might have that condition of deprivation in satisfying that oral fixation. Yan. So once there is a study, isang bata, he was deprived during his infancy of this oral satisfaction or yung fixation orally. Paglaki niya, of course, naturally, from his heredity, for yung oral na satisfaction, which became his sexual deviancy. Yan. Sexual deviancy, or even a habit when he was already in the adulthood stage. Yan. Smoking. Yan. Malakas manalita, or even yung sa sexual deviances. Same goes with anal fixation and phallic. Phallic stage, yan, abnormal family setup leading to unusual relationships with the mother or father. Kung abnormal relationships with mother, kumbaga yung anak laki masyadong attached kay mother, sa sobrang pagka-attach, yan, would develop some awkward situations with the mother, yan yung tinatawag na Electra complex, if I'm not mistaken. While kung sa father, yan yung, or I should say, yung Oedipus complex, while yung para sa father was the Electra complex. Yan. Okay. Are there any questions? Kung wala, I'll proceed. Next is, yan. Can I proceed to symbolic interactionism? A theoretical approach that can be utilized to clarify how social orders and or social branches or bunches come to see behaviors as deviant or conventional. Yung the use of symbols, symbolism, yan. There are examples there which could result to abnormalities. Yan. Would use those symbols to satisfy one's urge. Yan. Familiar man mo sa DAT, Differential Association Theory. It was formulated ni Edwin Sutherland. Labeling theory, of course, from the word label, a society or a group of people would label another group of people and would have that certain effect mentally and psychologically kay tungod sa mga actions pod sa lahing group. Na i-label nila na kana sila mga kautan man nakaigikan sa inganing lugar or kana stereotyping, which would siguro at some point, panindigan yan sa mga taong inaakusahan. Okay? Motivations for human behavior, there are extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic are those that arise from outside the individual. Yan. For example, mga trophies, recognition, na kung anong masabi ng iba. Extrinsic motivation, for example, yung mga tinatawag na mga social media stars, most often, if not all of them, are, of course, motivated sa fans and reactions. Yung likes, to the point na kailangan pa nila gumawa ng mga bagay na hindi naman normal because of those extrinsic motivations na ayan, ilang subscribers na sila, ilang hearts, ilang likes, ilang retweets. Yan. For athletes, of course, yung trophy nila or money that comes with their abilities. Yun yung motivations nila. While intrinsic motivations are those that arise from within the individual. More like a crossword puzzle na mahirap. The gratification of solving a problem is already their motivation. Ganun lang kasimple. Okay? Next, activation involves the decision to initiate a behavior such as enrolling in a psychology class. Yan. Na-activate yung interest ng individual because of something na naganahan niya. Persistence, of course, that is one of those characteristics. Yung effort niya and yung goal niya is connected no matter what obstacles may come to him or her, hindi siya titigil. Of course, ang investments niya napakarami. From time, energy, resources, even the mind. Okay? So, next, I'll proceed sa personality dimensions that affect human behavior. These are basically yung big 5 personality traits. I-refresh ta mo kay na encounter na ninyo ni. Okay? Yan, openness. Yan. Openness or pagiging open. If an individual has a high level of openness, napakaraming interest ang gagawin niya. He would show those talents ba na or skills niya to others. And of course, if he learns something new, he would be more eager to learn those because it is part of his interest. Yan. Na, from creativity, yan, pagiging open-minded, yan, openness yung nasa front low up, like po tong front row, yan. Open-minded sila. Of course, there's certain creativity in each one of them, but they're open to possibilities, to creativity in their craft. Kung mababa naman ang openness, yan, hindi naganahag change. Does not enjoy the things that are new to him. And of course, yung old ideas would just be the idea sa kanya. Hindi siya open sa mga bagong mga procedures. Like for example, driving. Kung nasanay ka na magdadrive ng motor or sasakyan na hindi tumitingin palagi sa side mirror, that's very dangerous. And kung siguro ang rason mo dahil ayaw mo magbago ng pamamaraan sa pag-drive, considered low level of openness. Extraversion, being an extrovert, very expressive. Yan, yung mga center of attention or life of the party. Yan. Of course, positive traits niyan kung high extroversion, a good number of friends or social circles and acquaintances. Kung mababang extroversion, yan yung mga introverts. They're very selective of who they talk to. Both introvert and extrovert, ani na siya. Every individual sa mundong iba na, of course, normal or announced as normal, We both have our introvert and extrovert qualities. The thing is, kung mas mataas ang extraversion ng isang tao, then yung mga positive traits under high level are most of those will be with him. Kung mababa ang level ng extraversion at mataas ang level or mataas ang level niya sa pagiging introvert, then mas dominant yung behavior niya sa introvert or introversion ba na. Yun. We both have our introvert and extrovert qualities. It depends on which level is higher. Kung anong level ang taas, yun ang medyo nakakalamang, mas dominant sa ating pag-uugali. Okay? Next, agreeableness. From the word being agreeable. Yan. Trusts others. Of course, trust himself. There is this what we call certain level of compassion. Yan. Kindness, affection. Nasa agreeableness yan. Neuroticism. Yan. When you have a high level of neuroticism, Diyos ko, stress. Na. Or the great worrier. When we say worry, the word worry, that is being stressed on something that is not yet happening. Yung worry, hindi pa yan nangyayari. Neuroticism, commonly ana, ang mga tao ana, gets upset easily. Siguro may problema silang hindi pa natatapos or may nangyayari sa katawan nila. Okay? Of course, they feel anxious or yung parang kada gamayng problema, mas stress na. Of course, when you have low level of neuroticism, emotionally stable. Nothing really na dominant sa behavior mo. Don't worry too much. And of course, you are virtually stress-free. Okay? Abnormal behavior, that would be affecting either the mental or physical state. Yan. Either innate yan, heredity, or acquired. Okay? So, napakaraming abnormal behavior. Yan. Struggle to manage emotions na kung for example, pagalitan siya magwild, bungkag ang mga butang na dool sa iya. Or for others, yung mga sobrang active. Yung hindi mapakali. Yan. ADHD. Are you familiar with that? ADHD? That's a certain hyperactivity disorder. Kung saan yung taong may ganon is not contented with sitting down for a long period of time. Yan. Of course, those with those similar types of situations or emotions have poor control sa impulse. Or for short, they are very impulsive. For example, this is a known fact. Si Lucy Torres Gomez, yung asawa ni Richard Gomez, yung congresswoman, every time before she goes into a mall, tawagan ni Richard Gomez. Niya, lahat ng kukunin ng asawa ko or mahawakan, bilhin nila. Because arguably, she has this what we call kleptomania. Yun, yung irresistible impulse to get something by the use of the hand. Yan. It's a known fact. Yun si Lucy. But at least there are medicines which controls that. Yan. Pero hindi yan magiging constant. And of course, one thing that lacks for those people na sobrang impulsive, they don't have discipline. Okay? Okay, so, okay. Last part na tayo. Let's go to sexual deviancy. Actually, these disorders are those included na mood swings. Babae, of course, commonly. I've experienced this. Yung isang babae, wala akong ginawa, pinagalitan ako. Na, of course, there might be a reason for her, but as far as my side goes, ewan ko anong ginawa ko. Yan. That's just an example. Anxiety disorders. Everyone has their own phobias. Or those things na siguro part of those panic attacks or fears. Yan. OCD, familiar mo ng OCD? Obsessive compulsive disorder, where someone who has this, hindi siya kontento. For example, kahit na nalinis na niya ang buong kwarto niya, but even if there is 1 inch na makita niya na, uy, parang hindi nalinis, she would clean it to the best of her abilities. Yun, tama. Perfectionist. Yan yun sila. OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. The thing with those perfectionists, they cannot control it because yung impulse nila is to be obsessive with one thing or multiple things. Yan yun. Okay? Phobias, napakarami. I'll be discussing that sa ULOB. Hopefully before magsugod ang crisis management. Sunod, mood disorders, MDD, dysthymia, or major depressive disorder. Okay? Personality disorders, napakarami. Best example niyan si Presidente. The reason nag-anal siya sa una niyang asawa because he is what we call a sociopath. Walang pakialam daw si Presidente sa feelings ng iba. Meron siyang delusion na siya ang pinakamagaling. According sa asawa niya, yung ex-wife. Okay? Itong sexual deviancy, I will explain this easier sa inyo ha. Na, katong gusto na mag-leave, pwede mo mag-leave. Sa mga gusto pa maminaw, i-chat na lang ninyo, maminaw mo. Okay? Let's start. Oh God. Okay? Sexual deviancy, those are certain actions of an individual which are, of course, can result to what we call the point of erection or kung masobra na talaga na. Orgasm. Saan ang orgasm? Saan ang orgasm? Let's be professional with this. Orgasm, mauna na tong mag-release tong mga liquids or some fluids inside the body. Yan. For females, of course, it would be released through their yung sa vagina. While males would be released sa penis. In order to achieve that point of erection or to later levels orgasm, there are different paraphilias or learned norms during sexual encounters. Yan. So, sexual deviancy, most of those na hindi makokontrol yan would result to them being charged of sexual offenses. Kasi yung paraphilia nila, they could not control it or it violates the rights or yung violation of a law. Kanang uga. Actually, kanang term na uga, na bisbisan ra na, lahat ng tao may orgasm. Once they reach the age of puberty, yan, possibility of creating an offspring dyan, meron na yung orgasm. Once the person or a person already is in puberty, capable na yan kung sa babae, having a child. Kung sa lalaki, yun, creating a child gihapon. So those sexual deviances are somehow unique. Ito kasi, ang normal na sexual intercourse, yun lang talaga penetration. Wala na yung iba pang mga ginagawa na yan. Modifications na lang yan para ma-achieve ang what we call erection or orgasm. Okay. So, types of sexual deviancy, iba lang to. Mga konti lang to. Voyeurism or peeping tom. May mga tao na kung may makita silang mga tao na nakahubad, usually strangers, na to turn on sila. Yan. voyeurism or peeping tom. Watching other people's have sex would make them have an erection or would result into an orgasm. Yan. Na-enjoy sila eh. Nakahubad na yung dalawa. 'Di ba? They're already having a sexual intercourse. So siya, na-excite. Wow, ang ganda live. 'Di ba? Ganun yun. That's voyeurism. May mga tao na ganyan. Next, pedophilia. This is basically characterized with a relationship between an adult or a fantasy ng adult with a pre-adolescent child. Yan. 13 years old or younger. Or those na matanda na sila or adulthood, nasa adulthood stage, pero yung partner nila sa sexual activity is very young, mataas ang age gap. Pedophilia. Na, commonly niyan ngayon, mga foreigners ang meron. They love Oriental people. To the point na dito sila magre-retiro for the main reason of pedophilia. My God, I hate it. Yan. Napakasagwa. Next, fetishism. Fetishism involves recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies. Best example ng fetishism, foot fetishism or fetishism. Yung mga taong may foot fetishism na should I say naho-horny sila pag dinidilaan or hinahawakan ang foot ng kanilang sexual partner. Na best example Joel Embiid. Na NBA player 'yun. He likes the feet. Naaaraw siya sa paa. There are other fetishism. This is most common sa lalaki, yung sa breasts. Yan. Fetishism on the breasts. Na siguro, gusto talaga nila. There are other fetishism. For example, yung mga sadomasochism. Yan. When we say masochism, mahilig siyang manakit. He likes to inflict pain on his sexual partner para ma-arouse. When we say sado, he or she is willing to accept pain from the sexual partner para ma-arouse. Kung pareho meron ganon, sadomasochism. Yan. Mahilig siyang manakit, mahilig din siyang masaktan. Kay lami man daw. Di ba? Yan yun. Fetishism. Those are just some samples. Yan. Sexual masochism and sexual sadism. Being sadistic. Yan. Recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies. Napakarami. Yan. One of those fetishism, before I end, yung fellatio. I would spell it sa inyo ha. O man kayo na, Diyos ko. Fellatio. That is a female or a male getting aroused by the female using her mouth and siguro making the male reproductive organ have an erection. Of course, by the use of the mouth ng female partner. That's fellatio. Na, kanang tag 150, tag 200, na, ang pangapi lang. Mauna na. That's fellatio. Na. Exhibitionism, mahilig magpakita in public. Yan. For example, nagbaktas ra dira sa highway unya kalitra mo abri sa iyahang treasure na pakita niya iyahang kaugalingon. Yan. Of course, commonly the genitals. Yan. Frotteurism involves intense sexually arousing fantasy, sexual urges or behaviors which involves touching the genitals or the sexual organs, commonly sa babae, and rubbing it against a non-consenting person. May mga babae at lalaking may ganyan na fetish. Okay? Yung mga ibang fetish, napakasagwa na. Coprolalia, na-excite siya or naaraw siya dahil sa ihi ng kanyang partner. Coprolog niya, naaraw siya sa dumi or yung stool ng kanyang partner. Naku, napakasadugwa. And also yung WAM, W-A-M, wet and messy. Yung mahilig silang mag-sexual intercourse pero siguro nasa dumi, nasa mud, or nadudumihan silang dalawa. Yan. Okay? So, are there any questions? Those are just some. Nako. Kung ihurot na ako tug ingon tanan, magreklamo ni sabay magreklamo dire kay overtime na. Okay, Mr. Bargio, please turn on your mics or your mic. Katong mga klase, pwede mo mag-leave. I still have 3 minutes pa man. Last na nako. Mr. Bargio, unsa may pangutana? Pwede i-microphone, pwede dili. I-chat na lang. Lakay question? Sige, kung wala kang question, yun. Oh, recorded ni. Recorded. So, pwede nyo balikan maya. Okay? Also, lastly, sa inyong exam, na gi-confirm na ko kay Sir Madam, dito bayot man si Norman. Tung sa tulong dunong, na tong head nila sa city, na gistoryahan na mo siya. Of course, giuna siya storya sa UM, and then I know him personally. Gipangutana na ako siya na, what about those college students sa mga private universities? Unsaon ba pagpasa nila sa siguro tong bisan tong proof na lang sa payment or proof of grant padulong sa inyo ha. Unsaon niya pag-reflect sa amo ang SAO sa UM. So giingon sa bayot na ay it will just be done within the next few weeks. Ang SAO, ang nauna napakita sa amin ng SAO, SSS grantees. Ang CHED or the local government, hindi pa na ipapasa daw. So, it's okay. As long as may mga pangalan, may patunay kayo, you will be taking the X tomorrow. There's no problem sa kwa. Kana, pangalan naman gipasa sa SSS. Wala pa jud tong specific details aside sa pangalan. So anyway, yun ang inuna nila napasa sa SAO. And yun ang napasa ng mga pangalan sa amin una. Okay? Na, questions? Nanay pangutana? So, Miss Solia, walay pangutana? Wala? Walay pangutana mga...
Wala.
Oh, Betito, pangutana, wala?
Wala na, sir.
Komendador, nakay pangutana? Okay, nilib. Sige, anyway. So, if you don't have any questions, your exam will be tomorrow. Napakadali lang ng exam ninyo. Halo, MCQ, pati ibang style. So, just make sure na meron kayong signal na malakas bukas, okay? If there aren't any questions, then that's all for today. Again, this session is recorded. This session is recorded and hopefully you will be viewing this again kung naamunit time, okay? So, good luck on your exams tomorrow. And hopefully, naamoy kusog na connection ana. Okay, happy na alas 4. Thank you and God bless sa tuwang tanan.
Thank you, sir.